Welcome to our webinar, The Pathway to CPQ Success. My name is Amy Cook and I am the Chief Marketing Officer of Simplus. I am delighted to moderate this webinar with two of the most experienced professionals in Salesforce CPQ, Gilles Muys and Max Rudman. Gilles and Max, thank you so much for coming onto this webinar today. It's a pleasure to be able to talk with you about the pathway to CPQ success.
Amy, thanks for having us. Thrilled to be here.
Thanks, Amy, for having us. Happy to be here as well.
Wonderful. Just a little bit of background about you guys for our attendees. Gilles Muys has over 20 years of experience in the quote-to-cash space and has implemented or significantly influenced over 500 quote-to-cash projects across all industries. He's one of the first 3 Steelbrick employees and is the only Salesforce CPQ Black Belt in the world. So I think, Gilles, it's safe to say you're one of the very best in the entire world, and I wish I could say that about myself about anything. So that's wonderful. And for our attendees, it's also great that Gilles is a former CFO and brings that financial perspective as well as a manufacturing industry perspective to the CPQ implementations that he does. And I've really enjoyed working with him at Simplus on some of these projects. Max Rudman founded Steelbrick, which is now Salesforce CPQ, to democratize access to CPQ. So it was an altruistic as well as a business endeavor. With over 3,500 customers of all sizes, the dream of bringing CPQ to the masses is well on the way to being realized. Now, as the CEO of Prodly, Max is dedicated to making the management of complex cloud apps, such as Salesforce CPQ, even easier. So we'd like to make this experience for you as personally valuable as possible. So attendees, please feel free to ask questions at any time and put them in the question box. We will be answering these questions in our live Q&A session following the webinar presentation. To help you get into the CPQ frame of mind, let me ask you a few questions about your CPQ journey to consider throughout the presentation. The first one that you may want to think about as you go through this presentation is, where are you currently in your CPQ journey? Are you evaluating a CPQ solution, or are you planning to implement a solution in your organization? Maybe you're currently implementing a solution, or maybe finishing up with the implementation, managing your CPQ process. The next question is, what solution are you currently using? Surprisingly, many people still use Excel. Perhaps you're using another solution and you're looking to explore other options. Next, what are your digital transformation challenges? Are you receiving a lot of competitive pressure, or are you trying to understand more about the changing customer purchasing in your industry? Next is, what is your primary objective for CPQ? Are you looking to reduce your sales cycle, improve visibility, make it easier to do business, maybe add self-service capabilities or automate? So throughout this presentation, we're hoping that you can get answers to all of these questions and more. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn the time over to Gilles and Max. First, I'll turn the time over to Max to discuss the evaluate stage. Then Gilles will cover the plan and implement stages, and Max will wrap up the presentation with the manage stage. After the presentation, we'll be doing a live session, as I mentioned, which I will be moderating. So please make sure to ask your questions in that question box throughout the presentation. Max, the floor is now yours.
Great, thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So we'll start with a few tips on how to evaluate a CPQ solution. So our first recommendation is to choose an agile solution. We kind of think of the world as, divided among 2 categories of CPQ. There's the new generation, the next generation, declaratively configured or low-code-based CPQ solutions, such as Salesforce CPQ, and then you typically have your legacy, heavy, that are code-based CPQ solutions. Obviously, one of the reasons you're implementing a CPQ system in the first place is to drive business agility. Look very carefully at the kind of CPQ solution you're choosing and make sure that it's agile and can scale with your business and scale with your needs as they change, which of course we all know they will. So next recommendation is to choose an implementation partner who is experienced with downstream integration and processes. CPQ is a linchpin of a more complex digital transformation project, most likely. Certainly a component of, quote-to-cash, which is a bigger, wider solution. But you certainly have your other systems still in your IT landscape. You have your ERP, you have your et cetera accounting system. So it's very important to consider downstream implications and integration. So make sure the partner you've chosen to help you in the implementation journey is experienced and well-versed in downstream processes as well. In choosing a CPQ solution, obviously make sure that you consider what of your peers. So traditionally, you'd have, analysts such as Gartner or Forrester, provide reports and magic quadrants and et cetera. So that's still an important source of information. But as of late, you've seen an emergence of peer-reviewed based solutions such as AppExchange, GTCrowd, Capterra. There's a number of these sites where you can go and get honest, unbiased reviews from your peers in your industry, in your use cases that will share their experiences with the product. When you choose an implementation partner, also make sure that you choose a partner that is experienced with a specific CPQ platform you've chosen. Certainly, in the Salesforce ecosystem, there's lots and lots of partners, right? That partner, lots and lots of services companies that partner with Salesforce, but look very carefully at the type of expertise they have and the type of projects they did. Right? They may be an amazing partner, a very capable firm who's done 1,000 Sales Cloud implementations, but that doesn't equip them to do a CPQ project. So make sure you partner with someone who has expertise specifically implementing the CPQ solution that you've chosen. So similarly, consider the connections that your partner has and what other ISVs, what other solutions they partner with. As I mentioned, CPQ rarely stands alone. It's typically part of a wider, bigger digital transformation project, which may include adjacent business processes, right? Either upstream or downstream. It may include, implementing a new billing system. It may include implementing a contract lifecycle management CLM system. It may include implementing, an e-signature solution. So make sure that you choose a partner that has experience with these adjacent solutions and also has relationships with the vendors in that space and can recommend the solution that's appropriate to you that will also work well with the CPQ product that you've chosen to implement. Be careful and evaluate the methodology of your SI, right? CPQ projects are different. The best approach is the best method is actually a hybrid approach. So traditionally, a waterfall methodology, right, where you kind of do all the design, all the implementation up front, all the testing. The problem with that, of course, is you don't get the feedback of the users until the very end, or it might be too late, right? The agile is, of course, doing, sort of these 2-week sprints and doing a little bit of everything. And that rarely works in CPQ either because you have to design up front, right? You can't just start with your simplest use case and architect it based on that. And then, find out 3 months later in sprint number 20 that you've actually, that it doesn't work for your very complex use case that you've left towards the end. So the best approach is to do the design up front, to consider all of your requirements, all of your use cases, design the entirety of the solution, and then implement iteratively using, these 2-3 week, whatever you want sprints. And then again, you go into the waterfall at the very end with a test and deploy. And the final recommendation in this section is to consider more than just the price. As with many IT projects, right, the real cost of the solution is maintenance. You definitely want to look at more than just the price up front. It is, CPQ is a journey. And the key to success is to kind of pick the low-hanging fruit with your initial implementation, but also be ready for it being an ongoing endeavor, and the cost is just a part of the equation. So make sure to look at the other factors, including the experience of partners and their methodology and the reviews that they have. And now Gilles will walk you through some of the best practices for the planning phase.
Thanks, Max. So in terms of planning, the first advice is to not do everything at once. As Max mentioned a few times, CPQ is a journey. So you need to plan for multiple iterations, not only in your phase 1 implementation, but also plan for multiple releases over time as you introduce progressively more and more functionality from your CPQ tools and from your business processes to support the environment and the change in your market. So prioritize very carefully Keep it simple on the first implementation, the first go live, and focus on what's going to bring you the most benefits while resolving the most significant pain points, and take advantage of automation. So delivering that quick ROI will also keep your executive buying, and we'll see that it's important to keep that sponsorship from your executive team. So for what you cannot implement immediately based on the prioritization, you always have the possibility to put mitigation controls in place and avoid getting into those edge cases upfront. We see also many times when you already use a CPQ tool that there is a huge temptation to just mirror your prior system into the new solution you're currently implementing. Most of the time, when you take that approach, your CPQ project will fail. So take that opportunity to implement a significant tool to rethink your business processes, having in mind the most important objectives of applying best practices, simplifying, bringing consistency in how you run the business between geographies, product lines, business units, and so on, and therefore be able to automate as much as possible. In order to do that, you will need to have a high engagement from your executive team. So as part of planning for it, you need to start thinking about your current systems and what is the quality of the data you have in those systems. If you wait to the last minute to take care of cleaning up your data, you're risking to have an extended timeline to implement your CPQ solutions. At the same time, a CPQ tool is going to bring a lot of new powerful functionality that you should seek to take advantage of. So it goes beyond just deduplicating your accounts, your contacts. You need to look at your product catalog, see if you currently have a lot of separate SKUs to represent different tiers in pricing, or in terms. For example, we see often products that are for 12 months, another one for 24 months, another one for 36 months. CPQ tools have the capability of using a single product and apply dynamic pricing to support those kind of concepts. So simplifying your product catalog is definitely an important step. On the side as well, for pricing, we often see a lot of complex price book strategies. Because CPQ provides a powerful price engine, you should be able to keep the price book strategy fairly simple. So think about how you sell and price to your channel partners versus to your customers directly. CPQ can support multiple channels on the same quote and apply the correct price for each of those different channels. At the end of the day, all this work you're going to do to clean the data and prepare for the project will allow you to reach your objectives of producing accurate quotes and take advantage of maximum automation in the system. So I mentioned several times that you should keep your executives involved and highly engaged in the project. So start by identifying an executive sponsor. It could be multiple ones that work as a team to support the project and the initiative. Make sure you identify also all the relevant subject matter experts when it comes to the sales process, the product management, pricing, etc. Also, do not forget to identify the end users that are going to help you on your journey to test the solution being implemented. So CPQ is complex. Max mentioned it. It has a deep reach throughout your entire organization. And as you identify your SMEs, keep in mind that CPQ will be tied to a lot of additional processes, whether upstream or downstream. So think about identifying the right teams to take care of legacy data migration and integration, mostly your IT departments, but also think about how the quotes, once accepted by your clients, are going to trigger your fulfillment process, is going to feed your billing system, and on the finance side, also contribute to help your finance team with revenue recognition, commission calculations, and so on. So don't look at CPQ as being a closed black box. It has far reaches throughout the organization. You can get a head start by documenting carefully your requirements. Start with the product catalog. That's usually what we recommend. Think about a different way of selling your products and services. So think about selling a solution. CPQ will bring you the power of being able to configure products and services, which means that you're now selling no longer individual products, but multiple products that answer the need of your end customers. At the same time, think also about how you're going to sell the value of the solutions. It's not just about the price, but the combination of products and how they relate to each other. Quote presentment is another big part of the CPQ process. So seeking standardization in that area when it comes to quote templates, approval authority, and so on is an important part of the project. And these are things that you can do before you start the implementation. I had an example of a customer who started with 128 different quote templates, and during the CPQ implementation, using the power of the doc engine in the CPQ tool, we're able to reduce the number of templates to a single one. So these are the extreme benefits you can obtain from that perspective through automation and simplification of the process. Keep in mind that the quote document you're going to generate and present to your clients is also a powerful selling tool. So work with your marketing team about branding, layouts. Make sure that the message you include in that document provide clarification about your company, about your products and services. At the end of the day, when your client receives that document, they need to understand very clearly what they're buying from you, why they're buying it, what kind of values they're going to get, and what is the price they're going to buy it for. If you're in a multinational environment, don't forget about localization. This is an important aspect that sometimes is overlooked. CPQ having far reaches through the entire organization, you're going to need to link the CPQ solution to other systems. So you have initially to bring your legacy data, so that's a typical data migration process. But also you might need to link the CPQ data to external systems. The best example would be for fulfillment and provisioning, for billing, revenue recognition, so all these links to the backend or back office systems that you keep running. Those external systems might also bring data into your Salesforce organization to provide CPQ with the right information as a product catalog, for example, or pricing. Clean out as much as you can, seek for consistency. It's required to get the possibility to automate the process, make it as low touch as possible. And that automation will in turn provide you with maximum return on investment. So think about how you run your business between your business units, your different geographies, document exceptions to those rules. For example, in the software industry, you have a lot of regulatory requirements in specific countries. So make sure this is documented ahead of time. Given everything we just said, as you can imagine, change management is a big aspect of rolling out CPQ. Two advices here. So first thing to take into account is how you are going to roll out your implemented solution. This might impact how you prioritize your different phases, your different releases. Again, through geographies, product line, business unit, channels, and so on. Keep the first implementation simple, as I mentioned before, and link into that rollout strategy you should seek to put in place early on. As you are going to implement CPQ, your process are going to change. The tools that your users will use are going to change. So you need to think about how to maximize adoption from your user base. One of the ways to do that is to get as early as possible participation from your future users into the build. So Max mentioned that the hybrid methodology was the best. And during the build phase, you should go through iterative cycles. And that's an opportunity to bring those future users, get that feedback early on, and adjust based on that feedback. You will save a lot of time and a lot of headaches by getting them involved early on. At the same time, those testers will become champion of the new tool, of the new process, and they will brag about it, about the benefits that it brings to their peers and colleagues, and that will help with adoption. Think also about end user training. Do you want to take a train the trainer approach? Think about potentially after go live having a help desk available so that users can still ask questions if they forgot how to use the tool for specific scenario or user stories. At the end of the day, you need to align people and processes, right? Because the implementation itself is just the beginning, it's the easiest part. Making sure that people embrace the new processes is a lot more difficult. So we'll go through a few tips regarding implementation. As any time for implementing a system that is tied to external system, you're going to have to choose what is the source of truth for your reference data. So which system between ERP and Salesforce will be your customer master, your product master? Where are you going to bring prices? And once you have the code accepted by the client, which system is going to be the starting point to generate the orders? At the end of the day, all this important consideration will also help you identify what are the integration points between your different systems, help prepare for the implementation and the timeline for your project. The idea is that because you've bought an off-the-shelf package for CPQ, you should avoid customizing it. On the other hand, you should try as much as possible to use all the functionality included into that package that supports your requirements. So avoiding customization is a good thing to say, but when you need them, don't fear using them. If you use Salesforce CPQ, for example, there are many different plugin mechanisms that I like to call standard customization or best practice customizations. So in that kind of context, it's perfectly okay to have a few customizations. Sometimes also a customization in the form of a few lines of code can replace many roles in a roles engine and provide a much cleaner implementation and easier to maintain. So again, do not fear it, but avoid the very complex customization that would create an engineering debt and also create some potential problems when you need to upgrade your CPQ package. So here the message is to try to avoid complexity. Most of the time, all companies consider that their own industry or the way they run their business is more complex than anybody else. But that complexity is actually one that you create as a company. You always have a choice. So consider adapting your processes in the sense of adopting industry best practices. Talk to your implementation partner about what other companies do in the same space or even in different spaces, and focus on the 20-80 rule, right? So look at the 20% of requirement that's going to bring you 80% of the benefits. As you go into the edge cases, you're going to find that you start getting not only diminishing returns, but sometimes even negative returns. And all these edge cases that you keep on the side because they bring too much complexity into the implementation, you always have the possibility to put in place some mitigation controls to address them. So Max will now talk to you about the last stage, which is manage.
Hey, thanks, Gilles. Awesome advice. Lots of nuggets of gold there. So let's talk a little bit about the manage phase. So as I explained in my opening slides, the benefits of choosing an agile, low code, declaratively configured. The interesting side effect of going with a low code, declaratively configured CPQ solution, however, is that configuration data, right, is actually stored as data, right? It's not metadata. Code is metadata. Data model is the metadata, but the configuration data that these declaratively configured apps rely on is not metadata. It's stored as data. So make sure that when you design your agile development process, you account for the fact that most of your configuration is actually stored as data, and have a process for updating it, for deploying it, just like you would with metadata with code. So on a related note, I've seen several customers try to build this out themselves, which of course is possible. You can script it, you can hack it, probably works in some cases, but there are now off-the-shelf solutions such as Broadleaf that do a great job at this. And so, as with almost anything, buy is more efficient, is more cost effective than build. So as you design your development process and deployment process, make sure you follow the best practices around making updates to CPQ. CPQ is a mission critical revenue generating system. You most definitely do not want to make changes directly in production. So the best practice is to make changes in a test environment and sandboxes, as they're called on Salesforce platform. Better yet, you want to have a sequence of sandboxes, right? So you can see the diagram here that depicts a typical landscape of sandboxes that we see, right? So all your development, there could be multiple development teams, multiple development streams, right? That's done in the developer sandboxes, and that could be, several of them. And then eventually it all gets converted into a QA, UAT sandbox where you do some testing, where you get a select group of users involved to give early feedback. And then from that, it goes into a sandbox where you can do training out of. And then it goes to a staging sandbox. That is typically a full copy sandbox that has all of your production data, and you do system integration testing. You test your connections to downstream systems, etc., and really test it against the full production data set. And then eventually it goes to production. So plan for user adoption from the outset. We love CPQ, Gilles and I. We're proud of the product that we worked on, but to be fair, technology is only a piece of it, and probably not that large of a piece, in the scheme of things. What it really comes down to is the process and the people. So don't overlook the importance of change management. You're going to have lots of, depending on the what type of organization you are, depending on the size of your sales force, depending on the age of your sales force, you may encounter some real resistance to change, to any change, right? You have a sales rep that's been there for 30 years and they've been doing quoting in Excel for 15 of them, or all 20 of them. That's going to be a hard change to make. Don't overlook the importance of driving change management, of figuring out how are you going to roll it out, and how are you going to drive user adoption. And, in my experience, it's typically a combination of sticks and carrots. You got to have both. So focus on your key success metrics. It is a CPQ, and certainly quota cash is a unique project. It is a very transformational project. It involves, almost every conceivable part of your organization, right? Sales, ops, marketing, probably product to some degree, potentially finance team if you're doing full quota cash. So you're going to have a lot of constituents. You're going to have a lot of opinions. You're going to be pulled in all kinds of different directions. So make sure that you keep your true north here. And as Gilles advised earlier, focus on the low-hanging fruit and delivering business value as quickly as possible, and delivering great ROI, which is what's going to keep your executives engaged, bought in, which is going to be very important, because CPQ is a journey, right? It doesn't end with the first go live. It actually just begins. We strongly recommend that you invest in somebody with administrative expertise, in Salesforce, if that's your platform of choice, and certainly CPQ. As I said, we said many times, I just said, no, right? It's a journey. It's going to continue. You're going to have changes. The go live is not the end, it's the beginning. And so you want to make sure that you have a resource that is dedicated to making these changes. If you are a larger organization, it probably makes sense to get somebody, a full-time resource, an internal resource. If you're a smaller organization, talk to your implementation partner. They may have managed services offering where they will make these updates on a regular basis for you on some sort of contingency fee. But don't try to go it alone. And there's nothing more damaging or potentially very dangerous than somebody with no experience and expertise attempting to update your CPQ system or make some changes. So the last piece of advice here is pipe up the new system. as I said earlier, right, change management is a big component of this. You need to get your people excited. You need to get your executives excited. Make sure you clearly explain the benefits of the new system. I typically, many times, and I see this work very well, is use some sort of an event like an SKO, like a sales kickoff or something like this, where your entire sales team is going to be there already, and use that to make the presentation and get everybody excited in anticipation of the rollout. So give them a sneak peek, give them a preview, make sure it has a nail on the head in terms of solving the problems that they have with current way of coding, either your prior CPQ solution or Excel, whatever it may be, and get everybody pumped up and excited, and it will roll out that much smoother. And I think that's the last slide that we have on best practices. So now we are on to Q&A, and I'll turn it over back to Amy.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Max and Gilles. That was a really interesting presentation. And I personally feel like, I've been deeply involved in CPQ content for several years now, and that's one of the most clearly laid out plans that I've ever seen when it comes to just helping us understand the overall process of the CPQ journey. So thank you so much for that. And we have a few questions from our audience here that I'd love to ask you, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Right. Okay, great. So the first question is for Max. Max, what's an example of a customer who's used CPQ to shorten sales cycles?
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for the question. It's a great question. The short answer is that almost every one of them, if not every one of them, will enjoy this as a key benefit. But one of my favorite examples is an early customer of ours called Nimble Storage. They built a next generation storage systems, and they cut their quoting time from several days to a few hours or less. Right. And this is because their products are obviously very technically complex, and there's a lot of configuration that's involved, and you need to make sure that you pick the right, disc array for the right chassis and the right cables and all that. Right. And that's just not even accounting for, for other benefits, like, eliminating errors, etc. So I think that's my favorite example, and they really improved their business so much so that they eventually got acquired by Hewlett Packard Enterprise.
It's very interesting. Thank you. So just to kind of recap, quoting time from several days to a few hours, that's something that's pretty consistent across the board with all of our customers. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I would say that's a very typical result.
Okay, very good. All right, Gilles, this next question is for you. All right, I have an executive who is open to implementing CPQ, but is not very engaged. What is the best way to encourage engagement from him?
We encounter that situation too frequently, unfortunately, so it's a very good question. I think the first thing to do is to talk to that executive, but also his or her peers, to make them realize that there is a digital transformation process going on, and that quote-to-cash implementation usually is going to increase their business agility. And it's very important for them to be able to reach their growth objectives, to meet their success criteria, and so on. At the same time, every department head is going to have different personal objectives into those kind of projects. So it's a matter of making them understand clearly what's in need for them, in addition to what's in need for the entire company. Talking a lot about the benefits of CPQ, the return on investments, the productivity gains, the transparency and visibility of the discounting is going to help them keep engaged through the entire process as you talk to their teams about the requirements, about the build, about the implementation.
Excellent. Okay, great answer. Max, this next question is for you. You mentioned hiring a Salesforce admin. This question comes from that slide. Do we need to hire someone internally to keep the implementation moving forward well? And how much time should we plan an internal stakeholder taking? I think the question is mostly, do we need to hire someone in-house?
Yeah, great question. As I've said, it probably depends quite a bit on the size of the organization, right? The complexity of your implementation and the pace of changes that you expect. you're a larger organization and a very complex implementation and you expect to do lots of updates, it probably makes sense to bring somebody in-house or, invest in training of your existing resources in CPQ, right? That could be another alternative. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to bring in a new headcount, right? You can send somebody, one of your existing architects or, admins to CPQ training. And by the way, this is a very dynamic, very high growth market. So, in my experience, people generally tend to welcome the opportunity to get trained on this hot technology. So that might fall in a very receptive ears. On the other hand, if you're a small organization and or don't expect to do that many updates, I think engaging AI who offers managed services is a good way to go.
All right, great question and great answer. Gilles, this next one is for you. I didn't know that change management came before the implement stage. Where can I go to find out more information on how to align people and processes?
Another good question. So good advice I can give is to call Simplus, for example. And why? So
Like Gilles, I love it.
So as if you need help in establishing your vision for that CPQ journey and how it's going to impact your organization, what you need is more than just technology expertise. You need, a partner that can help you with making the right strategic business decisions, which process to focus on, and going back to what I was explaining, prepare for it, plan for it, document what needs to be documented, including the success criteria and so on. And that's a difficult exercise because, again, everybody in your organization is going to have different goals and objectives, and it's a matter of aligning everybody together around a unified process. Looking to an SI, a partner that has that kind of expertise is very important.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That is our question and answer session. And before we break from this webinar, I just wanted to give all of our attendees a little bit more information. Gilles is currently writing a book called The Comprehensive Quote to Cash ebook, or Everything You Wanted to Know About Quote to Cash But Were Afraid to Ask. So I love this title, and I think that it's really the experience of so many of us. So if you would like to, we will be launching this book. It's a full-length book. It will cover the entire process from beginning to end and go into a lot of detail. And if you would like to pre-order your free copy and register to attend the launch party at Dreamforce in November, please email me, Amy, C-A-M-Y-C, at simplus.com, and I will put you on the list for a free copy and a registration for the launch party. So we're doing this at the Virgin Hotel, the brand new Virgin Hotel in San Francisco, and we hope that you'll join us there. So thank you once again, Max and Gilles. Thank you for your time and your expertise and your willingness to come and give us more information about the CPQ journey.
It was a pleasure, Amy. Thanks for having us.
Amy, thanks for having us. I had a blast. Thank you everyone for attending.
And thank you. And don't be shy, attendees, to reach out to Simplus and to Prodly for all of your CPQ needs.